I'm going to ask our education panel to come on out in the spirit of time. Dr. Laurence Alexander, the chancellor here at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. As you know, there is a special session of the legislature going on. He's going to have to get to Little Rock. In fact, as I mentioned, Simmons has been proudly headquartered here in Pine Bluff since 1903, and my first thought was I wanted the chancellor of UAPB to moderate our session, but then I said, no, I want to hear his thoughts, and I want him actually on the panel. So then I turned to an old friend who was kind enough to help me out, and it's somebody whose name you all know, who is the longtime president of Arkansas Baptist College in Little Rock, Fitz Hill. Fitz's older brother and I went to school actually all the way from the 4th grade through high school, and we're very close friends. So Fitz is younger. I've known him since he was a baby, but when he came back to Arkansas, he was head football coach at San Jose State University, one of the few African-American head football coaches in Division I, and has written a book, but wanted to come back home and came to Arkansas Baptist College. But one of the things that he focused on there was Delta literacy. And he has been a great force for the Delta region of our state. So please welcome our moderator, the president of Arkansas Baptist College, Dr. Fitzgerald Hill. Dr. Hill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Honored to be here with you today and to move you through this panel discussion on education in the Delta. I have a distinguished panel with me that I will give a brief introduction, and I'll ask them to kind of really explain themselves to you all, what they're actually doing in their organization in describing exactly what they do. So I'll give a brief introduction and we'll move forward in the interest of time. First, we have Dr. Richard Abernathy, who is Executive Director of the Arkansas Association of Education Administrators. Next, we have Dr. Laurence B. Alexander, which Rex just mentioned, is the 9th Chancellor of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Then we have Dr. T. Morton Gotcher, serves as Deputy Commissioner of the Arkansas Department of Education, working with legislators and school district on education-related issues. Also joining today is Ms. Tracey-Ann Nelson, who serves as Executive Director of the Arkansas Educational Association. Mr. Scott Shirey is the founder and Executive Director of the KIPP Delta Public Schools. And finally, we have Mr. Scott Smith, currently serves as Executive Director of the Arkansas Public Schools Resource Center. And when Rex called and asked if I would be involved, and when I talked to him, I said, Rex, what actually would you want me to, as moderator of this panel discussion, what points or deliverables would you like for me to have? He said, Fitz, I just want a really frank discussion with the panel on how we can improve educational issues in the Delta from grades K through 12 and even afterwards as a post-secondary education leader. So when I thought about when I came back here in 2005 after 20 years of coaching, and I was really astounded by something I heard. I picked up the Arkansas Business Journal, and I was going through, and I heard on TV in 2005, my true realizations of the problems in the Delta really hit me head on when I saw what the president of Toyota said, that they wanted to put a plant in Marion, Arkansas, and he said it came down, really wanted to do it in the Delta, but said that he could not do so because of economic reasons behind it, because the literacy level was so low that it would cost him over $3 million to go back and make manuals, pictorial manuals, because the people in the region couldn't read. I said, are you serious? I was just coming back from Silicon Valley, and I just couldn't believe it. But what I realized that literacy is not sexy. And a lot of times people can function in those capacities and you don't even know that they're illiterate. And I did as a coach, I oftentimes recruited young student athletes who would cope their way through high school, and then they would put out and then they would drop out. And so I really wanted to do something very different, and that's why, as Rex mentioned, from that deal I said, man, let's do something to make literacy sexy. And that's when I went to UAPB at the time, and I went to Grambling at the time, and I went to the Arkansas Literacy Council, because I think if we're going to do this, you can't do it in silos. You have to do it together. It has to be a collaborative effort. You can't stand alone if you're going to really attract this problem. And because here's what I realized. a dropout will drop in somewhere. And the issue must be that oftentimes when you can't read, you will drop out. And so the Delta Classic for Literacy was as such to start literacy centers in the Delta. There were 19 counties in 2006 that didn't have centers in the Delta to learn to read if you decided you wanted help. So that was why I say make it sexy. You won't get 40,000 people to a chemistry lecture, but you'll get them to a football game. So what we started doing was tricking them, taking $1 of every ticket, and we start funding literacy centers in the Delta. So we were able to create 11 literacy centers as a result of a football game, which everybody liked the band, everybody liked the tailgating, and everybody did that. So that was the initiative, because for me, if you created literacy centers, you help people get a GED, then of course I was by it. I said, get a GED and enroll in ABC. It was that simple. But we just want people to go to school. We want people to be engaged in higher education. We don't want people dropping out, and we realize what happens when you test reading at the 3rd grade reading level and they're not doing well. You have a tendency to be able to project the incarceration rate 10, 15 years later. So today we're going to talk about solutions and deliverables within our communities, within the organizations that we serve. And I'm going to ask Dr. Abernathy if he would speak to his perspective of developing educational programs in the Delta that truly addresses the needs of those and things that we can do. So you may know him as a resource and his organization as a resource that you could reach out to for more information as we move forward. We have a game plan for this for the next 40 minutes. It could change, and we have to check, and the stream may go differently, but we're going to try to flow as quickly as we can, so we'll have these outcomes and deliverables. So at the end, we'll take a few questions, and then we can respond to that accordingly. Dr. Abernathy.
Thank you, Dr. Hill, and it is an honor to be asked to come down here and visit with you a little bit about some of the issues around the Delta, and more importantly, about where we think schools are going and need to go. So I'll be honest, I'm excited right now about the future of education in the state of Arkansas. We as administrators, and I represent school administrators, superintendents, principals, special ed supervisors, et cetera, all across the state, and we work with those groups around the state. But I'm excited about where education is going. For several years, we have requested and asked that we change our emphasis in education and not try to force everyone to go to a 4-year college degree program. We realize that is important, and make no mistake, it is important. We still need to have those kids where they're able to go and attend. But we're missing a large population out there that's not going to obtain a 4-year college degree because they don't see the relevance in it. The jobs aren't available out there if they obtain that, but we've not gotten any traction. The last, since Governor Hutchinson is in office, he's kind of changed that focus. We have a new Commissioner of Education who understands the direction the governor would like to go, and we have a new director of ACE, Dr. Childers. So I think you see those groups working together and pulling together, and to where we're able to change the direction of some of our schools and some of our programs. I've heard several times, Dr. Hill, today talking about trying to develop regional solutions. That is the answer. What works here will not work in Pine Bluff, or will not work in Marion, will not work in Northwest Arkansas or other area of the state. Every region has to develop their own solution. And that's exactly what Senator Jane English passed back in 2015 legislative session, set up these regional advisory groups. And so I'm excited about some of the directions those are going. Mike Mertens and I have had an opportunity to attend several of these advisory meetings, and the solutions that's coming from these groups, I think is going to have a big impact on the state of Arkansas. But let me just talk to you a couple of things. I've also heard about growing your own and some of the concerns about getting people to move to your community. If you go back and look at from a regional solution group, growing your own, have those employees in those schools forming partnerships together, along with institutions of higher ed. You have to have them involved in this game as well. But that's where the real solution is going to be. We have, and you don't have to go out and replicate these systems, because there's examples all across the state of Arkansas. In the Delta, West Memphis, they're doing an outstanding job over there, developing programs for their students in conjunction with their business and higher ed over there, to where those kids are leaving high school certified and going to be a real contributor to economic development over there. If you've not looked at what West Memphis is doing, you need to go look at that and contact them, because they're doing phenomenal jobs for those kids. And if you want to wait until kids graduate from high school, you've missed the boat. That the kids, and even I'll go back, you need to be involving kids in middle school. You know, you can't be what you can't see. How many kids in middle school know what career opportunities are available to them out there? Not very many. They need to be going out and looking at some of these career opportunities. Businesses need to be coming in those schools, talk to those kids about the career opportunities. And then as we go on through high school, they need to be involved in higher education, forming concurrent credit programs, where when they leave high school, they're not only having a high school diploma, but they also have some credential out there that enables them to be able to go to work, enables them to be able to go to higher ed, four-year college program, whatever their goals are. But that's how you're going to solve the problem, or at least help solve the problem in the Delta. But partnerships, businesses, communities, higher ed, K-12, working together. And I would strongly encourage that process as we go forward, as many areas are doing.
Thanks, Dr. Abernathy. I really appreciate it. Talking about the partnerships, I can remember, and many of you, part of that collaboration was Sunday school. You remember that? I can remember Mr. L.J. Jackson, my Sunday school teacher in Arkadelphia. His wife was actually my 4th grade teacher, and it was amazing. We had to read that when it came around, and everybody had to read in Sunday school, and I can remember it so vividly. Somebody who was challenged reading that said, "Baby, we want you to come in on Wednesday night so we can help you with your reading skills." Those are the type of things that we must do, because he said, if you wait till after 3rd or 4th grade, we've probably missed it. Because those kids are not inspired. You don't drop out what you're good at. You quit what you're not good at. Because when you drop out and you're good in ball, you still play ball, but you think school's not cool. That's not it. It's because you had been good at it. So we got to make sure that we engage our students in a way that, as he said, just as the region, what may work for one student might not work for another. And it's so important as we stress these collaboration partnerships. We all know students don't care how much you know till they know how much you care. And that's so important that all organizations show love. So brings me up to Mr. Scott Smith, who I've served on this board a few years ago with the Arkansas Public Resource on what he's doing, and then I'm going to ask, once he finished, for Mr. Scott Shirey to go right in and tell about an application of the KIP program. Mr. Scott Smith?
Dr. Hill, thank you. Appreciate this opportunity to be with you today. I would just note that I'm one of the panel members who actually grew up in the Delta, and so I've got this close to my heart, and it's a very sincere issue to me. Let me just tell you a quick story. In my previous life, I was chief counsel for the State Board and Department of Education for a good number of years, and had the unfortunate duty of walking the state through a lot of consolidations and annexations. You may remember that point in time in our history, and was some distressed about that, because I grew up in a small rural community. I've got a lot of aunts and family members who are teachers and stuff, and while we were going through that, I had a hard time going home, because folks didn't quite understand that I had a job to do. It wasn't my plan, it was the legislature's plan, and I was just trying to help carry it out. But one day in particular, when I was pretty down about it, I called Dr. Cochran. Some of you may remember Dr. Cochran. He was a very distinguished professor at the University of Arkansas in public education, and was kind of lamenting what we were going through. And he said, "Hey, I just want you to do something for me real quick. Go find a map that was at the Department of Education that was done in the 1930s by the then U.S. Department of Education, and call me back." I went and found it, quickly reported to him what I saw, and he said, "What this is a map of where schools were located in the 1930s. And I pointed out, Dr. Cochran, there were a whole lot more schools in the 1930s than there are today. And there were a whole lot more schools in East and South Arkansas than there are today. Certainly more then than there are now than Northwest Arkansas." He said, "Do you know why that is?" And I said, "No, sir, I do not." He said, "Because cotton was king in the 1930s, and we had an agrarian-based economy." He's no longer with us, but he told me one thing I want you to always remember. A great economy usually supports a great public education system. A medium-level economy usually supports a medium-level public education system. and a poor level economy usually supports a poor level public education system. He said that's not always true, but we find that to be true more often than not. I say that to say this. He also said at that time he thought the state of Arkansas was evolving to certain major economic centers around the state, and communities were going to vie to be one of those centers. And it was very important that public education tried to partner with economic partners. APSRC serves both traditional school districts and charter schools. And we work very hard to leverage our relationships with Gates, Waltons, other players around the country and the state to try and bring educational resources to bear to support schools, to bring educational choice and opportunities where it's needed in many ways. The one thing I would leave you right off the bat is that if we don't have a public education system that's relevant to jobs and an economy, then we're failing. And that's a major issue in the Delta. And we've got to refocus and retool, and we are. The work that Dr. Abernathy is talking about at West Memphis, we help support that, help create that. We're very proud of that. We've also helped bring organizations like KIP in, and we're very proud of what they're doing. And I'll let Mr. Shirey speak about that for a moment.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll try to be brief. There's, again, my name is Scott Shirey. I'm the Executive Director of KIP Delta. Currently, we have 6 schools across eastern Arkansas serving 1,400 students. And I'll start with sort of one point and give 3 stories to illustrate that. We have to stop looking at the Delta as the place where challenges need to be addressed. We need to start looking at the Delta as places where solutions can be found. And I think that's a big paradigm shift. At least in my 15 years here, people always want to address the challenges first and not the solutions that are already taking place. I'll give 3 quick examples. When we first started in 2002, I went to the community. People looked at me and said, these kids aren't going to college. What are you trying to do? Sending these children to college. And nationally, we know 10% of low-income kids end up graduating from college, where if you're wealthy, you have an 80% chance of graduating from college. Right? So how do we change those numbers? So 6 years after our founding class, we have nearly 80% of our alumni are persisting in college, and with our early founding class, we're going to have close to 50% of them earn a 4-year college degree, which again is over 4 times the national average. There are solutions there. I think that the second piece, where are you going to find talent in the Delta? Well, you have to develop the talent. When we first started, it was myself and 3 teachers, and it was the same question. It was, how are you ever going to find teachers? How are you ever going to find leaders? Well, that small school we started in Helena, Arkansas, has now spawned 10 leaders. 5 of them are still running schools in Arkansas for us. One's running a school in Jackson, Mississippi. One's running a school in Gaston, North Carolina. You know, another one's a director of curriculum for myself. But when you look at it, who would have thought that Helena could have been an exporter of school leadership, running great schools not only in Arkansas, but in other places in the country. So it's a paradigm shift we have to think about. The third example I'll throw out there, and this one's the one that's most exciting to me. You know, when you look at all the Little Rock news and the competition between charters and public schools and all of the fights that happen, there's actually a great example of collaboration happening in Helena West Helena. It's taken a long time to get there, but this year we partnered, the last 2 years we partnered with the local school system. Between our school and their school, there's 150 seniors graduating this year. 140 of them have applied to college. Just think about that for a second. And then over 75% from the local school have been accepted, and over 90% from our school have been accepted to college. We're talking about Helena, Arkansas. So when you think 140 out of 150 kids, over 90% of the students there are applying and trying to get to go to college. That's transformational change that's happening before us. We have to celebrate it. And I think there's examples of collaboration that the rest of the state can look at and say, hey, we don't need to just look at the Delta as a place of challenge, but as a place of opportunity and solution. And the last thing I'll throw out there, because I had the great opportunity of serving on the steering committee for the Forward Steering Committee, which was a group that put together a comprehensive plan for education in the state of Arkansas. If you haven't seen it, go to forwardarkansas.org. But a lot of the things that are in that book talk about what we can do to uplift education throughout our entire state. And a lot of those things are starting to happen in the Delta right now. We need to embrace them and carry forward.
Thank you so much. I want to make mention that with Mr. Smith, actually, we created a partnership, and what they're mentioning, the collaborations are so critical. Mr. Smith came to me some 6-7 years ago and said, would we be interested at Arkansas Baptist College is having a charter school on our campus? And I said, well, how would it fit? And I said, does it fit our mission of our institution? What population would it serve? And he started saying, no, this is one for at-risk, high probability of dropout, and that really struck a chord with me because that's the mission of our institution. And so through partnerships with Premier, through Scott's organization, we do have what we call a dropout prevention charter school, because in my heart, I said, if you're at the bottom, I think you need more than one choice. It's amazing that when you're top of the scale, you have a lot of opportunities. But sometimes just because you're down at the bottom don't mean you should be categorized to go one place. And so now when students in Little Rock Public Schools looking for an alternative, as they mentioned, then we have that option for them, which we guarantee automatic admission into Arkansas Baptist College as a way, to keep students involved in the education process. And through that, looking at the two-headed monster, which Dr. Alexander will address later on through post-secondary education, but also realizing in our community, we have, in particular young African-American males, a 52% dropout rate of young men in the area. And so we as an organization went to the state and requested a GED center within our community as a way to engage adult learners. So to address that two-headed monster, if you want to still have traditional education through the charter school, you have that, but if you're a non-traditional learner, you have a way to go to school to get your GED as well. So we have to find solutions, as Mr. Shirey mentioned, rather than just identifying it's a challenge, because with every challenge there is an opportunity. And so that's the way we have to re-embrace our thinking. And with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Gotcher to speak well how legislators and state government can contribute, quickly, not in making these turnarounds and making things happen, so we can help catch people up in a very quickly manner. Dr. Gotcher.
You bet. Thank you, Dr. Hill, and thank you, Simmons Bank and Mr. Nelson, for inviting us, and it's an honor to be a part of this panel. And I love that word expeditiously that's on my I actually used that word earlier with Mr. Nelson. How can we allow this process to go a little more expeditiously, because I know we're close to lunchtime, and so we're aware of that. But when I think about the connections that I've made with many of this panel, I'm very encouraged, folks, by seeing the relationships that have already been built across this state. A phrase that I've used often is we're seeing the blurring of the lines between higher ed, career ed, and then public education, because we're recognizing for our state to grow, for our state to succeed, we've got to work together and partner together. So when I think about the question that Dr. Hill presented to me, and how can we address legislators and state government, part of what I do as deputy commissioner, I build relationships between our districts in our state, and also building relationships with our state legislators. And that's a delicate balance, because sometimes the needs of and demands of one group are not the desires and needs of the other group, and so it's a delicate balance. But for it to work expeditiously, and sometimes it can't be, you've got to build the relationships. Dr. Lupo at the earlier panel mentioned that, and I thought that was encouraging, because you hear that a lot when we talk about economic development across our state. Building relationships, folks, cannot be absent from that. So number one, we've got to build relationships, and that is going to occur with our legislators, our business folks, and of course the educators. Number two, we've got to identify and remove the barriers. I know that Mr. Smith and Dr. Abernathy and I have been a part of some other forums across the state talking about career ed and how we can break down those barriers. And that's a phrase we use often, because if we don't confront these barriers, how can we remove them? So we've got to identify and we've got to remove these barriers. And thirdly, these initiatives, folks, these regional initiatives have got to be inspired by you. They can't be inspired by the educational trends that are occurring across the nation in the latest, greatest article that comes out in Ed Weekly or something else. These initiatives have got to be inspired by you. And then the last thing I'll say, and I'll hand it back, I was interested by the word deliverables. And it dawned on me that a deliverable can only be delivered by the community if the one who's receiving it wants it. You can't receive, I'm not going to receive a package at my door that I did not order, nor do I want. So those deliverables have got to be received by the ones that ordered that deliverable, and that is inspired by you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gotcher. That's so true. And then we're going to roll quickly with Ms. Tracey-Ann Nelson and ask her to join in from an Arkansas Education Associate's perspective and how her organization can work to improve those initiatives.
Thank you, and good afternoon. We're there. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you to Simmons Bank, Mr. Nelson, for this essential discussion. I want to acknowledge in the room the president of the Arkansas Education Association, Brenda Robinson, who is a teacher in Pulaski County and serving as president. The AEA has always been involved in education in Arkansas and lifting up great public schools throughout the state for students, and we continue to do that. We continue to collaborate with all of the partners that recognize that students are the future of our state, and we are committed to quality educators in every single classroom in our schools in Arkansas. We advocate most of the time in collaboration with many of my colleagues on the panel to fulfill that promise of public education and preparing every student in Arkansas for college and career, and that our members who are educators in classrooms, as I said, are united as a voice to achieve that promise. Last month, for example, we collaborated with Comcast and legislators to address literacy in our Read Across America program. And we had a number of legislators across the state who participated in that effort to highlight the importance of literacy across Arkansas. We have a professional development program, and in November of last year, we had over 1,300 educators from across Arkansas participate. Many of them, and one of the sessions that we offered was to focus on schools that have academic challenges or distress. And those are the ways we try and work, not just on the shiny, pretty things, but the important things to help evolve and elevate the importance of students and their success across the state of Arkansas. We also partner with teacher preparation programs. University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff is one of our partners to help ensure that the teacher preparation programs meet the needs of our students and help them matriculate into classrooms across the state. And then we partner to support and mentor those teachers so that they stay relevant in school buildings. So those are some of the things that we do. There are some very difficult issues that we work on, but we know that those solutions will not come without educators as partners in discussions with parents, with administrators, and with legislators.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Nelson. I'm going to ask Dr. Alexander, now as a leader of post-secondary education, oftentimes in dealing with students who may arrive at our doors, sometimes underprepared for the rigors of higher education,
Sure.
But you can't close your doors. You have to keep access open for those students, and that can present challenges when you're dealing with federal regulations tied around Title IV, graduation rates, default rates, all those type of things. I call it high risk, high reward, but as an institution serving this region, he has a calling and passion to do that. And we'll ask Dr. Alexander to go ahead and share a light with our people here today about how you're addressing that.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm delighted to be here as well on this program, which is very important to all of us, to be on this distinguished panel with a number of our partners. And we do work in concert together on a number of things. I'd like to begin by just making a couple of points. One is that particularly since we have Kip on the panel, I did want to mention that for those who didn't know, that last year Kip put out a list of top 10 institutions and universities in the nation who are doing right by the kids. And we are pleased and proud to have been listed on that list. The University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, they had some very prestigious institutions from across this nation on that list, and we are proud of the partnership that we have with KIP and the kids that come from that area in Helena, and we feel like we are certainly contributing significantly in that way. As a leader in higher education, we have two higher education institutions in Pine Bluff, SEARC College and the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. I just want to mention something that ties this together in terms of the theme of the conference, because when I think of the Delta, I think of economic development. And I'd like to speak about, just for a couple of minutes, about higher education institutions as engines of economic development. I think so often we think of colleges as just places where students go and they go through classes and they get a degree and move on, or they get some credential and move on. That is true in some cases, but universities provide so much more in terms of the economic development. Of course, they provide this kind of credentialing. And in doing so, they are a part of workforce development. And I sometimes hear workforce development talked about, not in terms of four-year institutions or colleges, but it is certainly a part of it. And I know that you mentioned earlier the initiative that was started with Senator English. And we're very proud with SEARC to be a part of that initiative, to receive the initial grants. And we'll be going forward in partnership with the local schools and businesses in the community as part of that area. So we really are breaking down the walls and barriers and putting together a program that's really focused on STEM, that is preparing students who are in school right now in this area for jobs that will be there in the future. Secondly, in terms of economic development, I'd like to mention that at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, we do have an Economic Research Development Center that is actively engaged in helping to start new businesses, helping to expand business, and helping community economic development in the larger area. We have a new director there by the name of Jeff Pulliam. Please, if you have the opportunity, connect with him, contact him, and reach out to him. Third, universities contribute to communities in significant ways, and they have the opportunity at a university like UAPB to obtain research grants even beyond that. So we have begun to expand our reach through research, through the research enterprise, through faculty, staff, extension workers, and researchers who are engaged in areas just that span the spectrum, from biotechnology to nanotechnology and nanosciences. And these are not just pie in the sky things. These are things that are real, that are cutting edge when it comes to advancements in agriculture in this region for the Delta. So we are, and we want to have our partners in with us as we approach the federal government, as we approach corporations, as we approach these opportunities with a united front for bringing resources into this area that can effectively impact this area for the long term. And last but not least, I've been engaged at UAPB in a strategic and forward-thinking process for our university And our bottom line is growth. We want to grow the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, because growing the university means growing economic development. We're going to grow it in size, we're going to grow it in stature. And I know at the beginning of this show, our moderator, Rex Nelson, said that bigger isn't always better, or something like that, and that's so often true. But we don't want to just be bigger, we want to be bigger and better. And I think that that's important, that we focus as well, and we zero in on the quality of the things that we do at the university, the quality of the instruction, and that will impact the quality of our graduates, that will then come back and pay big dividends. Surely, we have students from inside the state of Arkansas and outside the state of Arkansas. More than 60% of our students come from the state of Arkansas, many of them from this region of Arkansas. Central Arkansas and South are where many or most of our students in Arkansas come from. And those students come, and those are the students that we know we can develop them, and they will likely remain in Arkansas and go on to develop businesses and work as professionals and others in Arkansas. Then there are students, of almost 40% of them, that we get from out of state. And you know, some people like to turn up their nose at the out-of-state student, but let me tell you what the out-of-state student does. It increases and helps us to grow as a community. Out-of-state students, surely they come in, they pay, some of them pay a larger premium because they have to pay the out-of-state rate, so they help the university. But when they come, so do their parents and their family and others, and they bring dollars. And they spend their dollars in our communities. And you know, their dollars from out of state spend the same way as the dollars that spend in state. And they enhance and develop the quality of our community. So to sum up and round up, I think what we need, bottom line, in a community such as this, is a good old SWOT. What did he say? SWOT. He said we need a good old SWOT. You know, a SWOT analysis. We're all engaged in SWOT analysis in our businesses. Yep. We do our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats. We've heard a couple of speakers say earlier today, what we need to build on our strengths. That's exactly right. We need to build on our strengths. But we need to identify our strengths, but we need to identify them as partners and identify the common strengths for the Delta and for the region, have agreement on them, and lock arms and walk together with that SWOT analysis, the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. And I want to commend the work of Simmons First for bringing this conference together, and commend the work of George Macris and Mr. Tommy May, who are through the Go Forward Pine Bluff program, is really bringing together people in terms of the SWOT analysis that I'm talking about. But I think it ought not stop and end there. And some people like to say, well we analyzed that 10 years ago, we did it 20 years ago. It needs to be a constantly renewing process. Every 2 to 3 years, we need to go back and look at our strengths and weaknesses and identify our progress.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. Economic development is so critical to the sustainability of higher education, public education, community development in many, many, many ways. We have a few minutes to take a couple questions. I'm going to help my homie, Rex, get back on schedule. And so what we'll do, we'll want to know if there are any questions from the audience from this distinguished panel that you have in front of you right now, if you would like to take any questions. We have a question right here, and you can direct your question to the panel of your choice.
Good afternoon. This is for anybody to answer. I heard you guys discuss earlier, we talked about the dropout rates and our young men not finishing school. And I also understand that there has to be order and rules in place at the schools. I work for juvenile court, and my question is, to start out, even though there are the dropout rates, we have many of our young men that are facing expulsion and are expelled because of zero tolerance policy, because of fights and having drugs at school. And nowadays, it seems like the administrators are so quick to pull the trigger instead of taking more time out to work with a student. So my question is, what advice can you all give about other alternatives to keep our young men at school?
Let me take a quick stab at that, if I may. As Dr. Abernathy alluded to earlier, we've done some very interesting work here lately with some different models around conversion charters in school districts, and thanks to his help also, we got some legislation passed with regards to waivers, which allow school folks flexibilities to create innovative ideas and to work with partnerships out there. Let me go to the model that he referenced at West Memphis, and actually we've done about 30 of these around the state since then. We went in and created conversion charters at the school district. They're part of the district. The focus was in West Memphis is that, look, we know where about the top 5 or 10% of our population are going to go, and unfortunately we know where about the bottom 5% of our population may end up. But we really don't have a good strategy for everybody in between. And how can we make sure that these students are tax producers rather than tax consumers at the end of the day once they graduate? We went and put in several levels of flexibility around these models, and we brought in key partners such as FedEx, Allied Health, the casino gaming industry, not on the gambling part, but on the hospitality side and some other areas out there. That's a big industry if you don't know that already. And a lot of opportunities. And West Memphis saw a drastic turnaround and change with their alternative learning environments and programs. And so much so, they had done a lot of work, and a lot of Dr. Hill's story about Toyota Mid-South Community College over there had done a lot of work. The trucking industry is really huge over there as an exchange with Memphis and all of that area. And just created really great opportunities and turned that thing around in a lot of ways. I went over and did a follow-up visit. They were showing us around, and there was one student that they had referenced who had really been a problem student for them and created a lot of issues, but was now their star student and had about 5 trucking companies competing, much like a college or university would compete over an athlete to try and get that student to go to work for them. And so when we took a break, I just went over there and kind of asked him, you know, what was the difference for him in a lot of ways. And he kind of looked at me, and I thought flippantly at first, said, "What's the difference for you?" And I thought, well, he hadn't changed that much, you know. But after I began to visit with him, he said, "Look, the way we were doing it, it wasn't relevant to me. And I couldn't see a future for me or my family. And, you know, I needed to be able to help my family right now, not 5 years down the road, not so many years down the road." And I was driving back to Little Rock that afternoon. I kind of thought, you know, I think that young man probably has it figured out for most of us. We need to be able to show these students a path that's going to have direct impact for them right now, and be able to show them opportunities and a reason why an education is relevant to them. And he was doing algebraic equations around pistons that go in an engine, but he supposedly couldn't do algebra in the classroom. Okay, so I think there's ways that we can go about doing this stuff and bring it back to the basics of why we really have an education in a lot of ways. And that's to provide opportunity and hope for students going forward.
And I'm going to let Dr. Gotcher speak to that too, but I think the critical point that we must recognize in this transition from this population that you were speaking of is mentorship. It's so important, particularly, you know, when we're looking at the fatherless generation that we're dealing with, and oftentimes mom is the primary breadwinner and out working, and so you have people raising themselves. And so as a community, you know, we can't look at that student and say, you know, what problems it brings. We have to see as a community how we can get involved with that student's life, from other organizations, from mentoring programs because oftentimes when kids can see what they can be, they will engage that process. And so I think that's important that we engage those from the community, from churches, from other organizations, to get involved with those youth and let them see we do love you, we do care about you. And I'm going to let you speak to that, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. And Scott Smith did a great job of showing the opportunities that are available for kids. And but something that struck me on your question, because it's a question that's rested on the desk of Commissioner Key and myself several times in some of our takeover districts where he serves as the board of directors. We get recommendations for expulsion for many students. And one that broke my heart, sir, was a young lady. Obviously, she made a grave mistake, but she was in her senior year with over a 3-point-something grade point average, and we denied that expulsion request because we knew that expelling a senior for the remainder of the year, it was likely we were sending that young lady down a road that could be very unsuccessful. So we've got to change the shift in thinking of the way our administrators think. But folks, many times our school boards are bound by their policies. And we have got to help school boards understand that policies can be changed, because if our goal is to educate these students, then let's educate them. And when we send them home, and folks, I'm telling you as a former superintendent, sometimes we do have to send them home. There are still ways through digital learning opportunities that we can send them home and still provide them an education. So we've got to shift the way we think with our administrators and with our school boards.
Awesome, that's outstanding.
So I want to just mention, piggyback on Dr. Gotcher's point of view, and that is we have to change our thinking from a punitive stance to one that says we must invest in our children. They must have a chance to make mistakes and still be mentored, supported, and educated.
Absolutely. We're going to take one last question, then we're going to break for lunch.
Good afternoon, Ryan Watley here. I have a question, or more so a thought, piggybacking on mentoring and the behavioral issues in the school. In inner city schools, particularly up north, they have a lot of segregation of gender, where you have your all boys and all girls school. Have we thought about that approach in Arkansas? Does that exist? Do we have a all boys or all girls school in the state of Arkansas? And so it was mentioned earlier that, you know, what works for one area doesn't work for another, but when we are approaching poverty in a lot of these areas, and education kind of synonymous with poverty, and behavior issues, do you guys think that approach will work? Or is that something in the state of Arkansas that we have evidence of being working?
We do have some evidence of it. There has been a charter school that was an all-boys residential school that was created in Little Rock at one point in time. The school was wildly successful. Unfortunately, the person who was involved in it was not, and the school suffered as a result of that. There is a proposal on the table, as I understand it now, for a girls' school that's being proposed by someone in the next application cycle of innovative schools. And so, yes, we do know that there's been some success with those models, and there are approaches around the country that you can look at.
There have been research on that and kind of mixed results, but you know, again, if it's a solution that a community or local school wants to try, I think that they should have the right to try that. I'm gonna go back on the discipline issue just a little bit, because it's real easy to say, well, we want to keep all kids in school, we want to keep all kids learning, and we absolutely do. But by the same token, there has to be certain standard out there, certain rules out there that common conduct has to come into play. Scott mentioned about the alternative learning programs. That may be a way to get a kid an education. The biggest thing that I hope you picked up on, Scott said, it has to be relevant. If learning is relevant to a kid, they're probably not going to misbehave. Dr. Hill and several of you have probably played in athletics. You probably wanted to behave in school because there was something relevant to your education made you want to be there. We need to find out what's relevant to each one of these kids out there, and hopefully that'll be the way to change their behavior. One other thing I want to bring out, schools are under-resourced when it comes to dealing with behavioral issues. We need behavioral specialists involved in these problems. We need to be working on the whole child. Social workers need to be involved in school. We have issues that our counselors are not able to deal with. We need those outside experts to be able to come in and help us and help with those kids and help with those families in order so their behavior can change and conform to what society usually suspects, where they can stay in school and learn.
That's absolutely. And with those points, we're going to conclude this conference. Let's give our panel a round of applause. I'm grateful to Mr. Rex Nelson for allowing me to moderate this panel discussion and to be a part of this conference. Thank you to Simmons Bank for making this happen, and we're so grateful, and hopefully you have some deliverables out of here today, or you have contact information that you can reach out to these organizations so you can find what's relative for your community. Thank you, and God bless each and every one of you.